Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Art Soundscape Seminar Series. Today, we are hosting Oliver Vogels from Cologne University in Germany. For the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time, I'm just going to introduce to you what is the Art Soundscape project. The Art Soundscape project is an ERC-funded project which began in the year 2018 and at the moment is now coming towards the end. The Art Soundscapes project, it has got various research lines which include characterizing the acoustic properties of rock art landscapes, the psychoacoustics of rock art landscapes, neuropsychology and emotion in rock art, ethnographic and ethnohistorical sources, the analysis of sacred emotion in rock art soundscapes. And all these research lines, they are married together by rock art, which is the main focus of the project. The Art Soundscapes project has got various team members, which are led by Margarita Diaz-Andreu as the principal investigator. And the team members are comprised of researchers with various expertise, which range from archaeology, psychology, acoustics, engineering, as well as GIS specialists. And I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm Joshua Kumbani, and I'm also a member of the Art Soundscape project, focusing on the rock art of Southern Africa and musical instruments that are depicted in the rock art. So the Art Soundscape project has conducted research in various countries, for example, in America, in the United States, Mexico, in Europe, for example, in Spain and Russia, as well as in Africa. And if you visit our webpage, we've got an exciting multi-sensory map, which can show you the sites that have where research has been conducted. And also you can visit some of the publications which have been produced as part of the project, and you can find these on our website. And we're also found on Facebook as well. The Art Soundscape project has been conducting a seminar series from the time when it's began. So many of the previous seminar series are also available on our website. If you want, you can visit our website and you can find some of these previous seminar series that we have hosted. Our today's guest is Oliver Vogels from the University of Cologne. Oliver studied music, musicology, African Studies and Archaeology from the University of Cologne in Germany. During his studies, he was part of research projects such as Our Way to Europe and the Wadi Sura project. His master's thesis investigated musical bow performances in the rock art of the Dâureb region in Brandberg in Namibia. In his PhD thesis, he investigated the rock art of the Dâureb on a broader scale by bringing together the archaeological record, local climate records, radiocarbon dates, geostatistical and GIS methods, as well as statistical analysis of rock art. His findings indicated that the Dâureb was visited particularly in times of drought, and that the spots chosen for painting reflect complex local and regional land use patterns. In the land use patterns, daily activities such as hunting and gathering can be similarly determined as spots chosen for group activities. Since 2019, Oliver has been part of research projects which include Indigenous knowledge and Archaeoinformatics and modeling prehistoric huntings, which aim to inform models on hunter-gatherer mobility based on empirical data obtained from hunting activities. of Johannes Okung hunting experts in the Nyae region in Namibia. So I will leave this time to Oliver to continue with his presentation on the depictions of musical bowls in Namibia, rock art, identification, analysis, and the social context of the instrumental music performances in a prehistoric later Stone Age hunter-gatherer society. Just a housekeeping issue. If you have got any questions, may you please just type your questions in the chat box, and then we'll have a question and answer session as soon as Oliver is done with his presentation. Welcome, Oliver. And now the floor is yours. I'm now stopping sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for this wonderful introduction. I share my screen now. Can you see it?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, audibly clear.
Wonderful. Yes, first of all, thank you very much to the Art Soundscapes project for having me here this afternoon. I'm very happy to give this presentation. As Joshua already introduced, that was part of my master's thesis. And I'm very happy to talk about this topic again because I think it's a very interesting and important one, and also a very difficult one to discern musical performances in rock art. And this is a reason why I love to share my ideas and methods, also in a critical way. So I'm very happy about any critical question or concern you have. But first of all, let me introduce the area and the rock art itself. The rock art I will talk about here is located in Namibia. Here we go. In Namibia, and it is particularly from a mountainous spot whose Afrikaans name is Brandberg, which is usually translated into English as Brandberg. The local Damara name is Dâureb, which means the burning mountain, which is then a direct translation to Brandberg. It is located close to the Namib Desert, one of the driest areas in the world, which brings in that the area surrounding the Dâureb is extremely dry. And in this area, the Dâureb seemed to be an oasis-like landscape with a very specific flora and fauna. And the most important thing seems to be that it is a granitic mountain. It's a former magma bubble that did not erupt in a volcanic explosion, but stayed in place, and then over hundreds of millions of years was eroded into its current shape. And on the granitic mountain, water does not run off and is seeping away as it is in the sandy areas around it, but it stays in place and can be easier collected by humans in water holes and schools. In the region surrounding the Dâureb and in the Dâureb itself, archaeological excavations have been done, mostly on rock art spots. And these rock art spots, or these archaeological excavations, brought C14 dates, which I show here in their calibrated form. And you can see that the major period of time the Dâureb and the entire region has been occupied was between 2000 BP and 6000 BP. And this is the reason why we assume that this time period must have been the time where the people also made the rock art. So this is an indirect dating technique, but there's also there was the very rare case that one piece of rock art, and I hope you can see my mouse pointer, one piece of rock art was fallen off the wall into a archaeological layer and could be bracketed by radiocarbon dates between 2700 or around 2700 BP, which is particularly or exactly in that period of time. So that period of time, that point in time marks the situation when the rock art fell off the wall, but we can assume that it was not too far away that the rock art has been painted there. So it shows that living in the Dâureb, painting there, making fires, staying at these rock art sites was, occurred in several occupation phases, and in that during these occupation phases, the rock art has been painted. My master's thesis started with these two depictions. When I studied musicology, African studies, and prehistoric archaeology in Cologne, I heard of a person called Tilman Lenzen Ertz, who did rock art research at our institute, and I learned that he knew about one or two instances of musical bow players in the Namibian rock art, because he was the person who was working on the rock art for 30 years. And he was very interested that some person would investigate these depictions a little further to find out a bit more. And I thought that's the perfect situation. It combines all my topics, and I was very interested to do that. So at the beginning, I was wondering, okay, there is these two depictions. How can I find out more about how, for example, musical bow performances are differentiated from shooting performances in the Dâureb rock art? The idea was that musical performances and shooting performances must have been identifiable in the past by these people by certain depicted features, such as different bow uses. You can see here the bow is held in different or in opposing postures. When shooting the bowstring is turned toward the body. When playing the bowstring is turned away from the body. And organological features. This is a term used in musicology to describe physical features of musical instruments. Like you can see here, there is a connection between the bowstring and the bow stave in both these cases. So the first idea was to do a literature review to find out more about musical bow playing techniques today in Southern Africa. And I focused here on the musical instruments of the native races of South Africa by Percival Kirby that has been published first in 1937 and then has been edited a couple of times until recently. I think the newest version of this book is from 2013. And here you can see two bow playing techniques used by Swazi musicians, and you can see the bow here on the left is played with a stick, but you can also see that a calabash is attached to the bow, and this calabash is held against the body of the musician in both cases. And on the right side, you can also see that the calabash is not only connected to the bow stave, but also to the bow string. These bows are fairly large compared to the ones we have seen before from the Namibian rock art. Also, various playing techniques have been recorded, for example, at the Jutmazi San or Kung San. Here's a musician on the left. He is holding the bow stave inside the mouth and attaching it to his teeth and playing it with a finger without a stick. In both cases here on the left at the Jutmazi San and on the right at the Kurana musician. Here, no tuning news is used to attach the bowstring to the bow stave. And let me jump back and say a word about the tuning news. The tuning news is used to split the bowstring into two halves. And with the tuning news, two different notes can be played on the bowstring. And the tuning news can also be moved, so the bow can be tuned. And that's a particular feature that is not always present. Like here, these musicians do not use a tuning news. There is also another playing type that is on the right side. Here's a lady sitting, and she is holding her or resting her bow on a canister, using it as a modern or more recent version of a calabash to enhance the volume of the sound, which is not present on the left. So here you can see there's already two different varieties of musical performance. The one that is quite silent on the left, which is not so loud that you can play it to a larger audience. And on the right, the musical performance might be a bit more loud enough to play it for people being in the audience surrounding this musical performance situation. Then there is further musical bows which are played with the mouth, and the idea is that, or the use of this musical bow playing technique is that the bow is quite silent, but the tones are amplified in the mouth cavity of these musical players, so that here the music is again mostly for the players themselves, or it can be amplified through the mouth, and overtones can be selected to give it a very different shape of tone. Then there is a particular type of bow that is notched. You can see these notches here at the bow stave. And in this case, the bow, the stick is not touching the string itself, but it is scraped over these notches, which brings the bowstring into movement and then creates a sound. And this player is using the thumb of his hand to adjust the tension of the bowstring, and this way adjusting the tone. And he's again also amplifying the sound via his mouth, and probably also selecting overtones by moving his mouth in a certain way. In the next methodological step, the idea was to discriminate bow postures in the Dâureb rock art from shooting performances. And here I used the Dâureb rock art collection, which comprises almost 40,000 single figures from 840 rock art sites in the Dâureb that have been collected by Harald Paga and Johannes Tuivu and Angula Shipahu between 1977 and 1985. Harald Paga died during his work, or he did not finish his work because he died in the middle of his recording in 1985 and could not finish the northeastern part. So you can see here these gray zones are not recorded on the northeastern part, and on the western part, the Numos Gorge has not been published. So the publication process was the following. Paga recorded the rock art on plastic foil, and in a second methodological step, this plastic foil was then recorded or transformed into black-white records, because in the 1980s, when this work was done, color publications were just too expensive. So the idea was to use black and white And these black and white recordings were then published in 6 volumes by Tilman Lenzen Erz, and he also transformed the rock art using a text or language-based transformation scheme into a digital data set. And this data set was then the one I used for the rock art analysis. And within the rock art, there are 1,400 figures using a bow. So this is the data set that I've used. So in the next step, I went through all these 1,400 figures with a bow and tried to find patterns. And these patterns exist in terms of bow postures. That means that the bow handlings were not random, but it occurred that certain bow handlings could be discerned, that in which people obviously depicted certain bow uses. And to better understand what these bow uses are and how these bow musical performances, shooting performances, carrying of the bow have been communicated in the rock art, I will quickly go through these different bow postures, so to get an idea how, yes, complex the situation is. Here you see bow head turned away, which means simply that the bow string is turned away from the body, which prohibits shooting of the bow. So these bows cannot depict shooting an arrow because the bowstring is the wrong way, which opens up different kinds of bow uses, potentially musical performances. Here in this situation, the bow is held turned away with bent arms. The bowstring is facing away from the body. In this situation, the bows are held with, sorry, in this case, it's not bent arms, it's outstretched arms. There's an issue here on that sheet, but here it's correct. Here it is held with bent arms. And on the right figure, you can see that there is a tuning noose also used with this bow, and a bowstring is touching, a stick is touching the bowstring. This is not the case on these 2 depictions on the left. At the very beginning, I showed that the tuning noose is a particular feature, or seems to be a particular feature of musical bows, because again, when the bowstring is tied back to the bow stave, this bow cannot be used for shooting, and therefore seems to be a particular feature of musical performances. The tuning noose, of course, on the right side, where no calabash is used, can be loosened and can be removed. So, or potentially, that this bow might be turned into a musical bow or just used in certain ways for musical performances. Here is the same situation. This is a little difficult to see. Figure 146 and 148 are here the important ones. 146 is the one, you can see a bow here that is held across the body with bent arm, but here the bow is struck by a stick that is held in a reflexive posture. The same is the case here, but the bowstring or the bow stave seems not be present anymore, and only the bowstring is visible. There's a difference here because on the right side, the figure on the right shows that the stick is not held in a reflexive way, and on the left it is held in a reflexive way, which is already a difference in playing techniques or depicting meaning. Here is another situation where or a similar situation, but the figure on the left is extremely elongated. And these elongated human figures are quite rare in the Dâureb rock art. And interestingly, you can see here there's a bow again held in transverse, or here the bow is held in transverse posture here as well. This figure is elongated. Both are striking the bowstring with a stick in a reflexive way. But if you compare this figure on the right, the bow is held the very same way, but the string is not struck with a stick. However, you can see here that there is an arm going down, and this might be a stick. So perhaps on the right side, you see a human playing or holding a bow in a typical musical bow way, but resting, so currently not playing. A similar situation is depicted here. Two elongated figures. The bow is held the very same way, but the preservation is quite poor. So either large parts of these figures are missing, and we cannot really say whether this is a musical performance or not. It just shows that these bow postures occur repeatedly. The next step is this posture where the bow is turned away with bent arm in a reflexive gesture. The bowstring is facing away from the body, but the bow is not held across the shoulder, but in front of the body. So a little bit further down than in the figures before. Here, in the two cases on the left, the bowstring is again tied back to the bow stave with the tuning noose. On the right, a depiction from the White Lady shelter. This seems not to be the case, or not clearly to be the case. And on the right side, you can also see there is the lower figure is playing the bow in the reflexive way. The upper figure is playing the bow in the non-reflexive way. Here, the question arises whether these are individual playing techniques, whether there is some differences in the music culture over time, or different cultures on the Dâureb, or whether this is just these are just different ways to communicate the musical bow playing. Open question. The next typical bow posture are bows held horizontally with a quiver. Here, in no case, a stick is touching the bowstring. But there are cases where a string is also depicted along with the bow in these upward redirected or horizontally held bows. And here it is not very clear whether these depictions are related to the mouth bow playing techniques, because they are different in a way compared to the playing techniques recorded by Kirby. And there's only 2-3 cases where these figures have been depicted. So this is again a question that is a bit open, whether this is the depiction here is just depicts carrying the bow or a musical performance. Similar situation here. The bow is held at chest height, and a stick is touching the bow or the bowstring, but it is not clear whether these figures are playing the bow or carrying it. What seems to be clear is that they're not using the mouth to amplify the sound. However, it could be that they are scraping the bowstring with the stick, but since these bows with the notches are not depicted, this is also difficult to say. Last but not least, there is very few situations where the bow has been played in a sitting position, and where a bow or a stick is touching the bow stave or the bowstring. These are 3 figures, and in only one figure there is these figures are in a communal playing situation, which is the one on the very bottom here. And so what we can say is discrimination of musical bow performances from shooting performances can be done by the presence of a tuning noose, which is an organological feature. It can be discriminated by striking the string with a stick in a reflexive gesture. It is less clear when the string is struck by a stick in a non-reflexive gesture, and it is even less clear when the bowstring is turned away from the body. So this in decreasing order, if all these features are present, it is quite clear that there is a musical performance. If only the bowstring is turned away, like on the bottom left, when the bowstring is just turned away from the body, this can be a carrying situation. If all these features come together, like it is here on the right side, this is a clear playing music situation. However, the interesting part is that depictions of musical bows are quite rare. So among the 1,400 bows being depicted in the Dâureb rock art, only 10 to 16, depending on how strict the musical performances are defined, 10 to 16 figures are clearly making music. On the other hand, the same situation exists with shooting bows, because only 48 figures clearly show shooting a bow, and only 25 of these show clearly shooting bow on game. So usually what people do is, like this figure here, shoot just into nothing. And even more regular, there's only the gesture of shooting the bow without a bow. So that's another topic, and it shows that the bow is related to very, very, very different situations, social situations, and is used to depict a large variety of different aspects of social life and of economic life. The largest part of bows is depicted as simply carrying. And this might be explained in a way that the musical, or that the bow must not be depicted explicitly in its potential uses, but the potential is enough. If the person is having a bow, the potential that the bow has is obvious to everyone, and does not need to depict it explicitly. So that's one thing that we can learn from musical bow depictions. Another very interesting situation seems to be that the social context of the musical bow is in the way that the typical configuration of the musical bow is a solo player without audience. In only 2 cases, the musical bow is being played in the Dâureb rock art in a larger group, and these are the 2 cases being depicted here. Resonators, amplification for larger groups, are also not present without one exception. That is the figure on the very right, where probably a quiver is attached to the bow stave. And this occurs quite regularly, but it's not clear here whether this technique is used to amplify the sound or just a typical carrying situation, which means that communal playing of the musical bow is quite rare. If we take a look at the ethnographic record, we can find 2 instances that might explain the situation, and that is, the first of the 2 is Nicholas England, who observed among the Jutnasi or Kungsan that vocal music repertoires are as thoroughly functional as those of the instrumental music, are purely entertaining. And what he means is that vocal music of the Kung is dedicated to communal music and is generally connected with ritual activities. However, these songs are not limited in function because they can also be sung in different situations. And they serve for entertainment, dancing, as well as for sources of the casual melodies, which means rituals are connected to certain songs, but these songs can also be played in different functional situations, which opens a complex theme about music. And it occurs like in the Dâureb rock art, there's also a very complex situation about instrumental music that might reflect these complex situations being present about music today. Lorna Marshall also emphasizes that playing music with or without bow among the Kung is never a performance in the sense of European musicians, but rather if the music is not ritual, people sing and play for their own delectation, and everyone participates to some degree in all aspects of the musical life. So here again, this also explains that music is a very complex situation, and also that music about among hunter-gatherers, particularly the Kungsan or Jutnyazi, are not very well understood, or the functional situations, and from this how we can translate these situations, or what we can learn from these situations about past depictions in the rock art. Yes, here in the summary again, musical performances among Southern African hunter-gatherer groups today are part of a variety of social activities, and this variety of social activities seems to be reflected in the Dâureb as well. From these findings, it can be said that if we take a look back to the archaeological record and the chronology of the Dâureb rock art, it could be seen that the rock art has been made by later Stone Age hunter-gatherers, and that the rock art predates the arrival of foreign music cultures, for example, Bantu-speaking groups who came later, moved into Southern Africa, which means that the rock art and the musical bow playing techniques that we can see in the Dâureb rock art is an indigenous Southern African trait or culture, or one of them. There might be many different ones. There's one particularly from Namibia. That's very interesting, because if we look at musical performances today, as we have seen at the very beginning, a large variety of playing techniques exist, with calabash, without calabash, with amplification techniques, and without these. And here we can see how the situation might have been before cultural contacts with these different groups. If you take a look to Southern Africa, and this is something Joshua Kombani and me worked on a lot, then you can see that here in the rock art, there are different depictions, and on the left, in the Northern Cape, there is one depiction that is quite similar to the Dâureb, as here is no calabash depicted. The player is that one. The player is striking the bow string, apparently, with a stick. The bow is held again across the shoulder. There is no resonator depicted here. In the other situations, or the other rock art depictions from where musical bow performances are known, there's a calabash attached to the bow. And here also the musical performances are different, as there is an audience surrounding the musical player. It's not clear here whether these people are taking part in the music. In some cases, that's a bit difficult to see here. It seems like these people are clapping hands, but this is something we can unfortunately not hear. That person is clearly, or could be clapping hands. It's not clear whether there is a larger musical situation here or whether they are just listening. But when we go back to Marshall, there is good reason to say that these musical performances are not in the way we're used to. One person is making music, the others are listening, but that everyone is taking part in the musical performance. And we can also have a look back to this Korana playing technique, and that one is somewhat similar to the ones depicted here, which shows that there is different playing techniques in the South African rock art compared to the Dâureb or Brandberg, and which opens up the question whether they are played by different cultural groups or whether there just has been a larger impact to the sound community from different cultures, or whether they are just different musical cultures in different regions. And in fact, with this, I am through with my presentation, and I'm very happy if there are many questions and critical notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for the wonderful presentation, for taking us through the ethnographic musical bowls playing, as well as the musical bowls depictions that are found in the Dâureb region in Namibia, as well as those that are found across Southern Africa.
Thanks, Joshua.
Okay, if I may, perhaps you can stop sharing the screen.
Of course.
And yeah, and as we said at the start, but not everybody was in. If you want to make any questions, just let us know, or just write your questions in the chat. But perhaps I could start. I think that you've probably explained a bit this, but I would like to ask you about regionalization. Do you think that there are different regions, and if they are, why? So thank you first very much for your talk. It has been really great. But regions.
Yes, that's a very difficult question, because one of the big issues is that dating rock art directly is very difficult, because, as everyone knows, for radiocarbon dates you need material, and there might be organic material in the paint. It might have been, so the paint is usually made of mineral pigments, but it is widely let's say accepted that these minerals might have been or the paint might have been made from mineral pigments that have been powdered, and the powder then has been made into paint using animal fat or blood. So there might be some organic material in the paint, but for dating the rock art has to be destroyed. And that's a point that is not widely used. It has been used recently. Again, it has been tried in the 1980s that the Dâureb But these days it was very difficult because radiocarbon dating techniques were not as advanced as they are today. And recently, good dates could be collected from South Africa, from different regions. So we have an idea that the rock art has been made in a large period of time. And in the Dâureb rock art, we know from indirect dating, it has been dated from between 6,000 and 2,000. So the rock art in South Africa also depicts, in some cases, and this is something Joshua Kumbani knows much better than me, also Europeans, foreign cultures, which are not present in the Dâureb rock art. There is 4 depictions of fat-tailed sheep, which indicates that there is a change in culture, or this is something that is not present in the later Stone Age, that's not present in the landscape. So this is something that must have been brought in, and perhaps around 2000 BP, when the rock art ended, which also explained that these are only 4 instances. So chronology-wise, it's very difficult to say whether the rock art in South Africa, because that's a broad period of time this rock art has been painted, and the Dâureb rock art are somewhat connected. But in terms of landscape, the rock art or the regions are very different. In South Africa, for example, it is very well known that the eland antelope is one of the most favored entities or animals that have been depicted. And that was part of very many ritual depictions, and also highlight the ritual ideas about this particular animal. Elands are not present or very rarely depicted in the Dâureb. There we have only 16 instances of this particular animal, which shows us that there is a different landscape, because eland needs to drink. And in the Dâureb rock art, there is only or mostly springbuck and oryx depicted, and these don't need to drink on a regular basis. So they are very well adapted to the rock art in the region close to the Namib Desert. So landscape-wise, these are very different regions. Chronology-wise, it's difficult to say, but usually we say the Dâureb rock art is older than most of the rock art in South Africa. But this is something, Joshua, you might also say a word about. From that, we could say culturally, this is very difficult to say, because the latest Stone Age in Southern Africa is, in this particular period of time, not too different to say. And if it would be different, then this might reflect different landscapes again. But we do not know what languages these people were speaking. We know today that very different and many San languages exist, and might have been existed in the past as well. But from the archaeological record, we cannot read anything about culture or language and music and these things. So the knowledge that we have comes then from the rock art, and that makes it very different. What we can see are these tiny differences, like different music cultures, that shows us there is a difference that needs to be explained. But these are bits and pieces, and over time we need to bring together these bits and pieces.
Okay, but I understand that the amount of depictions perhaps is not as high as for you to be able to say regionalization in terms of, you know, I mean, in addition to the chronology problem, is that perhaps the number of depictions is not that huge in order to see clear differences. I don't know whether you have an opinion on that, and also then there are some questions in the chat. But Josh, right?
I think maybe what I can add on regionalization in terms of musical bowls is that if we compare the musical bowls that are depicted in Namibia, you will realize that they do not have the resonators or the gold resonators, but they have what Oliver was talking about, which is the tuning noose, a string which ties the string. to the bow stave. But in South Africa, we hardly have those that have got tuning nooses. So it's normally bows without the resonators or bows with the resonators. So I think it's something which is distinct, which might also shows the variations between the cultural groups. And also in terms of animal depictions, like what Oliver was saying, that in Namibia we hardly find the eland, and in South Africa it is the dominant species that we find in the art. In Zimbabwe, it's mainly the kudu. So I think the rock art of Southern Africa generally it varies from one place to another, which may hint maybe on various cultural groups which were living in these spaces, though there might be one or two links between these prehistoric communities.
That's a very interesting point you're raising, because in Zimbabwe, the kudu is the most frequent animal. At the Dâureb, it's springbuck, oryx. In the south, it's eland. But in terms of style, as far as we know, the rock art at the Dâureb and in Zimbabwe, for example, in the Matobo hills, is super close. They seem to be very, very similar, way more similar than these two compared to South Africa. So, but these stylistic differences are very difficult to argue, because usually it's that the rock art in the region belongs to the hunter-gatherer fine line art, and different stylistic features are until today very poorly understood and very underdeveloped. So currently this is one large stylistic period, and we can see these different landscape features, like the different animals that have been depicted.
Yeah.
Lydia, I don't know whether you want to ask your question directly. I've allowed you. I don't know whether Lydia is still...
Hello.
Oh, great.
Can you listen to me now? Yeah, sure. First, thank you, Oliver, for that brilliant presentation. It was very clear for me, even I'm not an archaeologist. I'm one of the acousticians of the project. So my question was more curiosity. It's just, I wonder if you have any of those performances you show in the first part of the methodology pictures. Did you have any of them recorded? I mean, sound recorded, so that we can listen to that music performance?
That's a very good question. There are, I didn't record any of these performances. There are recordings available. There is some recordings by Gerhard Kubik, who did recordings in Angola in the 1960s. They are archived in Austria. There is also some of these sounds available. Let me see if I can quickly find something. But I'm not sure I have something around for the moment. I'm honestly not prepared for that. Because also the music as it sounds today might not have sounded that way in the past, because this is something we do not really know. If I now show something how the music is, or the musical bow is played today, then we quickly get the idea that the musical bow might have sounded the same way 2,000 years ago, which might be completely wrong, because we don't know how the past was. So this is kind of suggestive. And also there is so many different cultural contexts in the past 2,000 years that what we can say is definitely the musical bow playing techniques today are different from 2,000 years ago. So I might search for it, but I'm not sure I can find something. I might find, you can even find these on the internet.
Yeah, maybe you can do it later and
Yeah.
share with
I can
us
try.
in the chat.
So if you do a search on musical bow Namibia or musical bow San on the internet, you find a lot of instances of musical bow playing techniques. That's an easy task.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
So Fernando, if you want to put your camera, I've also allowed you. I don't know whether you can do that.
I'm mute. Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Marga. How are you doing?
Hi.
Thanks for the great talk. And my question would be, you mentioned some people hand clapping. One of your last images, it's quite interesting. And so far as I know, there are not many images in rock art around the world with people clapping hands. So far I know a few in North Africa, also in from a publication in South Africa from Bert Woodhouse. I would like to know if you have any publication where I could find images of people hand clapping, because this is quite interesting. And I'll tell you why. Because before any musical instrument, I believe, and it's not only my idea, other musicologists think that hand clapping and the voice could have been the first instruments, because hand clapping is good for making rhythm, and it is probably one of the first instruments is the hands for clapping. I would like to have your ideas about this, if you have any available depictions of people hand clapping. Thank you very much.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Of course, hand clapping is a universal, or singing and hand clapping are universal musical techniques. And my idea is they go back hundreds of thousands of years in human history. But of course, these are the most difficult to find in the archaeological record. We will not find them there. They are not explicitly given. So what we need to look for is, for example, in rock art. I completely agree with this. There is some occurrences in the Dâureb rock art. This is what I can say. And there is the Dâureb rock art. I did not mention that the Dâureb rock art collection, or the dataset, is available online. And I might put the link in the chat here. There is the entire dataset about the 40,000 figures is available, and also the publications I mentioned are available online as PDF files, so that you can look through and find these depictions. And I can also, I would not mind searching these instances and send them to you. That would not be an issue. They exist.
Thank you.
They are somewhat difficult to find, because this could mean many different things. And I think that if we say that hand clapping is, again, depends on the social situation around. If there is a musical bow, it's rather clear that this is a musical performance. If, like Matthias Günther already was asking in the chat, if there is a trend situation, that can be discerned from different aspects. Then there is also, we know from the ethnographic record that trance is accompanied by women singing and clapping hands. So this is another situation. And this situation, I think also from, and Joshua might know this as well, or Matthias Günther, in the literature about South African rock art and the trance situations, there has been mentioned here and there. As far as I remember, there are some occasions where you can see people clapping hands, but they're quite rare.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Matthias, would you like to ask directly your question? Otherwise, we'd read it. Matthias Wunter. Right.
Can I be heard now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah, no, I was wondering whether there was any, in the evidence in the Brandberg Dâureb rock art, whether you found any evidence to suggest that these musical bow performances, either solo or to audiences, were related to trance at all or altered states. I'm thinking of a really interesting paper that was written by Megan Beasley ages ago about a thumb piano player, a solo player who was so absorbed in playing the dango that he actually became entranced, that he entered an altered state. And I'm also thinking of a paper by a musicologist Berliner, I read it ages ago, about a Zimbabwean solo player of the same instrument who played it with such absorption, self-absorption, that he actually entered an altered state. Is there any way of telling whether or not the playing of this particular instrument, the musical bow, had the same effect on either the player or the audience?
Very difficult question. As you know much better than me, usually trance situations or the communal trance situations are in larger groups. Trying to understand or to see trance performances from these single figures walking, playing a musical bow in their mouth. There are descriptions by Nicholas Inland, the Marshalls, and other people that hunters, while being on the move during hunting, used the bow for playing music. They used the bow also in smaller or larger groups to mimic animal sounds and behavior. There, as you say, there are situations where people reach trance by musical instruments. But as far as I can see, or as far as we could see, there is no clear, it's not so clear as in the South African rock art, where you have rain animals, for example. We didn't identify those in the rock art in Namibia so far. There are drum lines. There are different aspects that you can say these are related to trance or to the transition from this world to the other world. And so they exist in the rock art, but rarely, and as far as we could see, not connected to this musical instrument, instrumental music situations. So yes and no. Of course, it could be that these single figures were playing themselves into trance, but it's very hard to tell. And I cannot discern whether the one is doing something else than the other, because the depictions are just similar in this technique. It might be that these elongated persons, this is something I think in trance situations or medicine men, medicine men had this kind of feeling while reaching trance, that they are flying, being elongated, and these different impressions they had might be depicted in that form, that these elongated musical bow players reflect something like this. That's might be a good explanation.
Can I just ask, are any of these 1,700 or so bow using figures, are any of them therianthropes?
Also a very difficult question.
You mentioned a couple of these elongated figures that seem to be sort of mytho-mystical figures. What about therianthropes playing the musical bow?
Well, according to the definition of Tillman, he said that a therianthrope is clearly discernible if it has at least 3 animal-human mix features, like a human with an animal head might wear a mask, but a human with an animal head and hoofs is clearly a therianthrope. And according to this definition, not a single of the musician is a therianthrope.
Thank you.
I think that Meenakshi, would you like to also open your camera and ask directly?
Hey.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi,
Hello.
Meenakshi, nice to see you.
Hi, Oliver. Nice. This is a very good presentation, very interesting. But I'm wondering, is there any community, those who are using these bows as a musical instrument?
Again,
Does it exist?
this is again a very good question. When I was in Namibia, I always asked persons, do you know someone playing a bow? Because although I was there busy with other things, when I was in Nyae working with the Jutmazi-san, or at the Dâureb region working with Damara, and the reply I always got was, yes, there are some elder persons still playing the bow fairly good, but this is a technique that is vanishing. So it seems to be this is something not taken up so much by people today. It is still present, and if you ask, you also find persons playing the musical bow, but I think this is more difficult to find.
Oh, but in my opinion, it's very important to, if you get somebody who's still doing it, to record it, to try to understand it. I don't know. This is what I'm doing in my country, that's why I'm asking you. I'm trying to search all those old instruments, whatever is there, because still some of them are existing and those local tribes are using them. So it's
I
very
completely agree with you. The problem is, I'm not so much an anthropologist, although I studied ethnomusicology. I'm not very well trained in this. I'm an archaeologist, and I think this is something that needs to be done by trained ethnomusicologists, which I'm not really. So yes, I agree with you. This is something we need to catch up, and it has been done by persons like Gerhard Kubik and his students in Southern Africa in different cultures. Particularly, I think in Namibia, quite little is known about these indigenous music cultures and about their social situations and social roles. There has been done work by Emmanuel Olivier and others, but this is something that definitely needs to be extended.
Yeah. Anyways, it was a very good presentation and very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. It's always nice. Okay. Thanks, Ollie. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Matthias, perhaps you want to ask?
I just wanted to say that when I did my field work in hoansi and amongst the Naro and Kalkresi, many people played the bow in many different ways. So I was very interested to see these various techniques. And I mean, I haven't really looked at that, but now I will go back to my field notes and look at this more closely. But I've seen dozens of performances the two years I was there by people. So at that time, it was still done quite extensively. As for the question about the music, I don't know if this can be seen here. There's John Brearley, years ago, he produced a tape, Music of the Kalahari, and it has a number of musical bow performances on it. And it is released through Survival International. You can get it there, John Brearley. Okay, just for information. Yes.
Thank you so much. During the past 5 years, I worked in Nyae with hunting experts, so with San Jutmazi, and we were out hunting every day, and none of them was dedicated to playing the bow in the meanwhile while we were sitting at the camp resting or whatever. So, and these are persons between my age, around 40 up to 70. And they said, no, yes, they are. There are persons, of course, but no, we don't do it. Unfortunately, I was quite sad to hear that.
So there's another question by AS, who I don't know who he or she is. So this question is, are there any other musical instruments depicted, like drums?
Very good question. Not in the Dâureb rock art, and there's a simple explanation for that. So, wrong. There might be other instruments like reed flutes, which are known also from the ethnographic record. There are some instances recorded by Scherz in his books where you can see people having a pipe like this or playing like a flute. They exist. They have not been extensively analyzed so far. This is something we also need to do. When I looked through the Dâureb rock art depictions, I couldn't see many of them, or I couldn't see any of them, but as I said, I didn't analyze this in detail. Drums do not exist in Namibian rock art, and drums and Joshua Kombani just recently wrote a paper about that topic. I think there is one depiction of a drum, or very, very few, in South Africa. And this shows that the drum is not a native instrument in Southern Africa to me, but that's something that has been brought in from Central Africa. But that's a question about drums that Joshua can better explain than I can.
Great. Josh, I don't know whether you want to ask or
Sorry, Joshua,
maybe...
to shifting that discussion to you.
Okay.
But you're the expert.
Okay, let me say something about the existence of drums in the rock art. Drums in the rock art of Southern Africa, they are very scarce. So in South Africa, there is one possible drum depiction from Croot Village site in the Eastern Cape, which was recorded around the 1950s by Lee and Woodhouse. So they just recorded it and they hinted that it could be a musical instrument or a drum, and they didn't describe it further. So I recently wrote a paper about that depiction. So if you look at the motif, the shape of the motif, it's a conical shape which is broad at the top, and then it narrows at the base. So this is the most common morphological shape of the drums that you can find in Southern Africa. That is why I propose that it could be a drum depiction based on the shape and also the posture of the human figure who is depicted next to this motif. So it is like the motif is playing the drum with outstretched hands. And also in Zimbabwe, we might have a possible drum depiction from Lake Chiwero. But I think those are the only two instances that I can refer to about the occurrence of drums in the rock art. Like what Oliver was saying about why they are very rare. It is thought that the Semi communities, they didn't use drums, but drums were used by the band communities or the farmers who came into the Southern African region in the first millennium AD. So it is thought that the farmers, they are the ones who brought the drums because they are made of wood, and also they had metal tools which could carve wood for them to make the drum resonator. So it is thought to be something which was introduced at a later stage among the San communities, and then they adopted the drum. I wanted to say something about the question. I can't remember, is it Matthias who was asking that, can we say the musical bow, the instances where it has been used in trance settings? It is quite interesting because South African researchers like David Lewis Williams and David Pierce, I think in their book in 2004, they argued that the use of bows, like the musical bows depiction in the art, are associated with rain shamans, because they were linking that to, I think, ethnography, because they said in the Kalahari, a rain shaman used to play a bow when they were asking for rain. But there is one side in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, I think it's Wide Valley. It has got a big panel where there is a musical bow player who is tapping the bow using a stick, and there is someone who is clapping, and then there are about 5 men who are involved in what can be dance based on their postures. They are slightly bending forward, and they've got outstretched arms as well as bent legs. And also on the same panel, there are 2 eland. One of them is lying down in a supine position like it's dead. And there's also one figure with a long dancing stick, and it seems like this figure as well is also dancing. So some of these depictions, if you look at the aspect of clapping and dancing by men, it hints to how trance dances have been described as featuring people that are clapping as well as the dancers. So I think if someone looks deep into this aspect, there might be a link between musical bow playing and trance. And also Lewis Williams, when he wrote about musical bows, I think it's a 1981 paper, he was arguing that it is for solo performance. But what can we say about panels that have got a musical bow player who is accompanied by various people? Were they not listening to the music performance which was happening? So it's kind of difficult for us to isolate the people who might be associated with the musical bow player, and then we say, no, it was only meant for individual enjoyment. I understand that in some instances you might find an isolated musical bow player, and in that case, yeah, it is clear that it was for personal enjoyment. But where we find more people associated with the musical bow player, and there is a sign that there is a connection and people were gathered in the same space for this performance, I think it shows that it's something which was also played for a number of people. I think that's all that I can say for now.
I would love to see that single depiction that you mentioned at the beginning, because I haven't seen a clear trance situation as you explained it, related to musical bow playing. I haven't seen it so far. So as far as we can say, currently playing musical bows in trance situations is rather implicit or not very explicit. As you said, these figures playing a single musical bow, we just don't know what is the social context here. And in these very clear situations that you were explaining, there is a clear trans connotation there. But I think this is also respects the large variety of social contexts in which musical instruments could have been played. And I would not mind saying that there is like a scale. On the one side, there is playing for oneself, on the other side, there is the large communal playing. And in between, there's a large variety of different social situations in which musical bows might have been played, being from music or just sounds or whatever they could do on that bow. There are many different explanations. And I think also the variety of musical performances today might reflect in some way the variances of musical performances in the past, although they might have been different. But there is not one single social context. There is many different ones. And I think from the Dâureb rock, we can see that it's the case there. From South Africa, we can see it's the case there. And I think the same is also, I hope the same is also the case in Zimbabwe, something that Clémentine Bourbiot might know better than us because she's working there, and she's also part of the visitors here. So this is something we might learn in the future, that playing instruments, be it the musical bow, reed flutes, and other musical instruments are far more widely distributed in the rock art as we know today. And I just hope that persons, and I'm forcing myself as well when I say that, we need to look further into these tiny bits and pieces and bring things together to better understand about these music cultures.
Great.
Are there further questions?
I don't think so. So I guess that we could close the debate now, and thank you again for this great talk and great discussion. And Josh, I'll let you finish off.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marga. Thank you very much, Oliver, for accepting our invitation and for presenting on a very interesting topic. And thank you, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for joining this talk.
Welcome.
And for the wonderful discussion.
Thank you.